Hey folks, I figured I'd record this sort of build diary that I mentioned. It's basically the end of the first day of Blight League. I think I managed to hit, 72. I've done a single map. It took me a while to trudge my way up to maps this time. But we definitely got there. We had some pretty good luck too. I managed to find a tabula in Act 1, which was kind of silly. So that really helped everything. And I sort of gambled on linking this soul mantle that I picked up pretty cheap and managed to do it relatively quickly. So I wound up switching to Ancestral Bond somewhere around like just before Cruel Lab this time. Skill tree is pretty much exactly as planned at this point. Everything seems to have gone pretty well. Snapped up to... I actually bought this before I got my Act 5 one. I definitely think I would hold off on Ancestral Bond when leveling Freezing Pulse totems. I will say, this is the first time I've League started with this, compared to Holy Flame. It's just what I usually... what I've League started the past couple Leagues, and then before that I was League starting like Arc Totems. And the first Snow Jewels make such a huge difference. But even with them, I would say I think Holy Flame Totem probably still levels a little bit easier. You don't feel quite as bad if you wind up switching to like Ancestral Bond at like 35 to 40 or something. But it really wasn't that bad. And then as soon as you hit Ritual of Awakening, like pretty much all totem builds, but particularly Freezing Pulse, it feels like Second Lab feels like where this build takes off. Especially if you can already have, this setup here by the time you finish Cruel Lab. And then hunt down one of these Self-Flagellation Jewels. Everything's been pretty smooth since then. Gear-wise, we did pretty good. I will say, this +1 to level of all cold spell skill gems is really, really nice for the leveling process. I found this guy right here really early on. It was just a drop. It's item level 11, right? I found this before I even found the tabula. Somewhere like, just the middle of Act 1, basically. But I want you to look at how strong this is, right? So if I equip this guy instead, got 11,000 tooltip, and then compare it to this item level 66, 59 level wand, which has a pretty decent spell damage roll for this level, crit strike, mana regen, and a much higher implicit spell damage, right? It still cannot compete with this 13% spell damage wand because it has a little bit of flat cold and this +1 to all cold spells. It really is a humongous boon while leveling. And what I would do is, if you are still leveling by the time you see this video and you're in Trade League, keep your eye on the trade site and search this affix specifically. Probably paired with like cast speed. And you can kind of browse through wands or scepters that rolled this, but maybe didn't roll a spell damage, prefix. And you can just craft that yourself. Otherwise, you might get a decent deal with one that does have spell damage. They're a humongous boost while leveling. I was actually dual wielding a wand, these two wands before I got this. Right before I switched over to a shield. I picked up a cheap shield from somebody who was a little bit further than me. It only takes an item level 70 Shaper Shield to start doing alterations. And like usual, I got it pretty quick. It doesn't have anything good on it, right? It just has totems and spell block, basically. Which is what I alterationed and then regaled it into Energy Shield, which doesn't matter. And then I put some cold res on it to make sure that I capped my my resists. Most of my other gear is pretty suspect. I'm pretty much just focusing on hitting my resist caps now that I have the full penalty. One other thing I wanted to mention that I found really useful is that the absolute cheapest oil is this clear oil. You're going to wind up with, if you're doing the mechanic as you're leveling, you're going to wind up with a bunch of this. It crafts alacrity, which is 30 dex, which is particularly useful for us because it means we can pretty cheaply slot this dexterity major while we're leveling and just sort of keep it all the way up until we're going to be ready to switch into something like Flash Freeze or like Throat Seeker or Heart Seeker or whatever you wind up taking. And it helps ease up on these dex requirements that are harder to hit when you're in the, like, 25 to 65 range. It's just really nice. So don't be afraid to chuck some clear oil at your amulets to make sure that you're hitting that. But I figured I'd drop a map in before I wrap this up. I actually have only done one map, basically. I haven't hardly gotten to maps, so hopefully we don't get killed. I think we didn't die the whole way, right? Yeah. I'd be kind of surprised if I died with the Tabula, I suppose. But at this point, we just got to maps. Literally, I've only done the one, and we're already, like, fine, Everything's going pretty smooth at this point already. We're on a 5 link. It's technically like a 6 link because of the Soul Mantle's free spell totem. But I kind of wanted to show how the Blight mechanic itself has been going. It feels like totems, as we kind of expected, right, have turned out to be really good for the Blight mechanic. We'll clear around this a little bit. What I found is once you've switched over to totems in particular, right, so we've got 3 portals going, so we'll probably drop a buff here. And I like to just drop minions near the portals. These minion towers kind of help keep stuff locked up, and then you can use these buff towers to extend over to your minion towers, right? So with this, we should be hitting all of them, and we can kind of see on the map if we need to clear out like a larger chunk. That seems to be the easiest way to deal with these towers while you're totems in the early part of things. Minion towers seem to have not much issue wrapping these guys up. And then you can kind of move your totems over and take care of it. Of course, we've got some prod shields. I will say the rares in these packs turned out to be real beefy. This guy's still alive. But that's sort of been my general strat. This was actually like one of the more awkward blights too. Usually you'll get like 2 sides, or sometimes you'll get a straight lane. And that's sort of been the simplest solution to most of these, is just sort of bind them up with minion towers and use that buff tower to make them stronger. I don't think I've actually seen one as split up as that, and it was still, totally fine. I'll go ahead and clear this map out. I think at this point in my gear, my next step is going to be probably grabbing a Wise Oak and maybe a Clear Mind. I did enjoy the new clarity while leveling too. The first like 45, 50 levels at least, you're still doing a lot of self-casting, right? And clarity and Herald of Ice tend to be my go-tos while you're still doing self-casting, so that you're not reserving too much mana in case you want to go Mind Over Matter early, which I did. I went Mind Over Matter around Innocence Fight, I think. But yeah, I mean, I felt like this was still a really capable league starter. I didn't have much of an issue already into my Soul Mantle setup, which means it's not going to be much longer before we're deeper into maps and making some more currency. The league mechanic, I will say, seems worth it, right? It seems a lot like Legion's reward system, but with more experience. This was actually the highest. I finished the story at this level. It's the highest I've ever finished a story. I was intentionally not skipping any of those blights to see, you know, how much experience they were rewarding and how over leveled I'd wind up. And usually I do that with a new league mechanic, right? I didn't skip any memories while leveling the first time, and I didn't skip any Legion monoliths the first time. And this was the highest level I ever wound up, so they definitely seem worth doing, at least while you're leveling. And they provided quite a bit of currency too. Around the time that I had the Tabula and I was saving up to get this, I think I had like 10 or 11 chaos by then, like around level 50-ish, 55. So it just it seems worth doing, and I wouldn't skip them even early. Obviously, I'm probably a little bit biased considering that that's exactly where that Tabula came from. But yeah, I'm really happy with how this turned out as a league starter. I think it's probably a little bit shakier than Holy Flame Totem when it comes to pure league start. It felt smoother for sure as Holy Flame Totem, especially in that like 25 to 45 to 50 range. But I feel like this build jumps ahead a little bit once you wind up taking Rich of Awakening. I still wind up taking Conviction of Power, by the way, for my Merciless Lab set. I still think this is our Uber Lab point. But it's more justifiable, I think, to switch these around and take Divine Guidance early now. You'll get some damage and more defense out of it, along with some mana. But I think it's a little bit easier to make the transition into crit when you already have your power charges, because it can be quite a while to get your Uber Lab point, depending on your luck or how willing you are to chase down trials from like the global channels or whatever. But yeah, hopefully your league start's going well. This one seemed to be turning out pretty good. Also, thanks to everybody who stopped by the stream today. Like, a ton of people stopped by, and it was really cool. I had a lot of fun streaming today, and I'll definitely be streaming a lot in the coming weeks. So yeah, if you're bored, feel free to stop by the stream. I obviously need some sleep. It's hella late. We played a shitload today. But yeah. Enjoy Blight, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.